like January, February of 2021. Again, one of those like, dang it, things aren't working for me. Like my pivot moments tend to happen in moments of frustration. I don't know if that's true for you, but definitely happened in like oh, I got to make something change here. And I like thought back to my bachelor's degree and I was like, oh, direct mail marketing campaign. I wonder what that would look like. And so I got a little creative. I sent cards to every single NFL team. That's really the space that I wanted to be working in. Sent cards to every NFL team saying like, "Hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm going to follow up with you in a couple weeks with an email." And I was like, "This is not going to work, right? Like, there's no way this is going to work." But it's fun, and it's costing me postage and some cards and envelopes. And so I did that. I followed up with the email a couple weeks later, and I actually got a response from the Baltimore Ravens. They were like, "Hey, this sounds really cool. Like, let's talk about this." And so they had me do a virtual workshop for their rookies that season.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with Laura Barnes. How are you doing today, Laura?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
I just thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. It's just exciting to start another conversation.
Absolutely.
So, the way I love kicking off the show is really just talking about the importance of networking. How are we connected?
So we actually got connected through a mutual connection, Olivia Atkin. I met her through a networking group a couple years ago, and we have kept in touch. And she told me about you and your podcast, and just said that it would be a great opportunity for us to connect and talk more about our stories. So that's the quick and easy version of it.
Olivia does such a great job connecting people, and she always just does an amazing job of connecting the right people as well. While I think
Yeah,
we all share different stories and have different stories, it's creating that networking and that connection is just so important.
yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I want to start off by asking you, what's your origin story? Think comic book issue number one. Who are you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, going way back, I was born in Southern California, and I have two older brothers, 2.5 and 5 years older than I am. We moved to Colorado with my parents when I was about 7, and we moved to a small town called Carbondale, rural Western Colorado, very much a blue collar kind of working class community. And that's kind of, I mean, that's the super quick version of how it started. But really, growing up in that area, I was in Western Colorado from 7 to 17, and there were probably three things that I would say really came out in that time that were super pivotal to my childhood, and then also who I am as an adult. And so it's kind of fun to think back on, how that all started and where it all came from. But I would say first and foremost, the thing that was sort of a through line in my childhood was imagination. I was a kid with a very vivid imagination. It was super easy for me to spend, my whole day daydreaming. And I was really fortunate to grow up in a family where that wasn't a bad thing. I was never scolded or told to, get your head out of the clouds or stop daydreaming. And in fact, my mom tells a story that when I was probably about 5 or 6, I told her I was going to go up to my room to play. And about an hour later, she was like, "Oh, I need to go check on her. She hasn't come back down. Like, I hope everything's okay. She probably just fell asleep." And she walked upstairs and kind of peeked into my room. And I was having a full on conversation with imaginary friends, my council of stuffed animals, who knows? But my imagination runs wild. And that was always something that was kind of celebrated in my family. Even I learned how to read with my mom and my older brother. We would read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. So really tapping into that fantasy and creative. And that was a big part of my childhood. So I'm really fortunate for that. And then the second thing that happened was, again, the area that we grew up, or that I was raised in, Carbondale, rural Western Colorado, but it was about 45 minutes outside of Aspen, which is definitely much more of a luxury area, higher income, higher socioeconomic status. And what was really cool about that was being in Carbondale, blue collar, working class families, and a lot of hippies, ironically enough. I got to be really comfortable in that environment. I got to, talk to people who were doing the same things that I was doing. My parents were both working class, blue collar folks. And so that was really interesting. But then at the same time, my parents, whether they did this intentionally or not, I don't know, also exposed us to, life in Aspen. So we would go to Aspen for holidays and celebrations and birthday dinners. And it was really cool to be in that environment and to see life through a different lens, right? To understand that the way that I was raised and kind of our traditional simple life, like there was more out there to be explored. There was more available to me if I chose to explore it, chose to ask for it, chose to want it. And I think it also gave me the ability to talk to people from all backgrounds and all walks of life, whether they make 50 million a year or 50,000 a year. Like I'm comfortable having a conversation with them because of those two dynamics. And then I would say the third thing that was really common in my childhood that I would say is key to my origin story is the fact that I love people watching. I mean, you put me in a mall or an airport, and I am fascinated by people and what they do and how they behave. And it was something that I developed as a kid. Having two older brothers, I would watch the things that they got in trouble for and then try not to do them myself so I wouldn't get in trouble, or do them smarter so I wouldn't get caught. And so it was just a really interesting dynamic of observing the people around me. My parents would, when they would go to parties and bring us along with them, I was around adults and I was watching their conversations and how they interacted. And I think that really gave me a passion and a love for just understanding people and who they are and what makes them tick, what makes them tick in a good way and in a bad way, and just being able to kind of pick up on those little nuanced things through nothing more than just observation.
Laura, I love that. I think it's so interesting that you mentioned having that experience of people from, I guess, multiple walks of life, multiple parts of the world, even though it wasn't that far. It's being able to hold a conversation, understand a little bit. Even as a child, you might not fully grasp why people do specific things, but to have the ability to understand and see that different world, I think is so important.
Yeah, it is. And it's something that I'm realizing not a lot of people are exposed to, and sometimes it's because of access. You don't have access to it, which I definitely understand. But again, I'm very grateful and very fortunate that I was afforded those opportunities and that my parents, I believe, saw value in, what that would expose us to and how that would help us develop as adults. And so, but yeah, I think that, whenever people get the opportunity, putting themselves in situations that are unique, a little bit different, where you're going to encounter people who are not exactly like you, I think that is one of the fastest ways to just exponentially grow into, the person that you're capable of becoming.
Laura, you mentioned you spent most of your childhood up until about 17 out there. What happened next?
So after Colorado, I moved around quite a bit. I went to college in San Francisco initially. I was there for about a year. So talk about culture shock, going from small town in Western Colorado to San Francisco. Lots of sights and sounds and experiences that I was not quite expecting. And so I was in San Francisco for a while. I moved back to Colorado and worked in Aspen for about a year and a half in the hospitality industry, and decided I wanted to up level my career. And at the time, I was maybe 19 because I graduated high school a year early. I skipped fourth grade, so I graduated when I was 17. So, working in Aspen when I was 18, 19, my mindset at the time was, I'm young. It's a small town. Everyone in the hospitality industry knows everyone, so people know how young I am. So how can I fast track my career? And for me, that was moving out of state again. I moved to Providence, Rhode Island, and pursued a degree that I was like, well, it's going to give me a couple more years of schooling, another degree. And when I come out of this, I will have a couple more years of experience. I will be a little bit older, and I should be able to start a little higher up in the ranks. Which unfortunately was not true because my bachelor's degree I finished in 2008 in the hospitality field, and that was not a great time for hospitality with a recession going on. So from there, I honestly was a little bit burnt out on school and life and didn't really want to just take an anything job. So I found a job working in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, as a horse groom, as a groom at a barn. So I moved into a house with four or five other grooms. I think there were six of us in total. And my job was taking care of horses for a family of four. They had about 16 horses, and so I was, up at the crack of dawn, cleaning stalls, feeding, doing everything for the horses. And that lasted about a month because I don't like the cold, and it was December in Canada. So I didn't last very long. But yeah, I came back to Colorado. I ended up getting a certification as a household manager. I was just kind of trying to figure out like where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do with my life. But got certified as a household manager. I worked in hospitality. Ended up doing a few more moves like around the country. Moved to Washington State, South Carolina, kind of all over the place. But yeah, it was kind of a process of figuring out who I was, what I loved and cared about, and where I wanted to go.
Or you mentioned just making that decision and going with it. I think it's so important for people to be willing to pivot when that experience, let's say you moved up to Canada and it wasn't either what you expected or what you were ready for. So you're able to pivot and make the next best decision, which happened to be moving back to Colorado. I think it's so
Mhm.
important for people to just experience and at least try those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we sell ourselves short in terms of what we believe we can do, um, because of our own limiting beliefs, the stories we've been told, maybe the fact that nobody in our family has ever moved out of state, right? Like I've met people who have never left the state that they were born in. And so I think that there's a lot of unnecessary fear that we carry around with us. And I encourage people, especially young adults who I've worked with in the past, like I always encourage them, you can always come back, right? Like home will always be here. Whatever state you're from, wherever your parents are, like they're always going to be your parents, they're always going to be your family, they're always going to be there. But this opportunity to, if a job opportunity presents itself, or going to school out of state, or following the person that you're in love with across the country, right? Like whatever the motivation is, there's nothing wrong with trying it because you yourself are the person who is resilient, resourceful, and can find a solution no matter what happens, whether it works out or it doesn't when you get there.
Or you mentioned that it's so important just to go for it and just try it and experience it. And maybe down the road you realize that wasn't for you. But at least I think it's important to never have that what if feeling if you can help it.
Yeah, and I think some people also get caught up. They're so worried about the I don't want to make the wrong choice, or I don't want to close myself off from other opportunities. So I'm just going to stay here and keep doing what I'm doing and see what opportunities present themselves. And it's like by closing by choosing nothing, you're still choosing something, right? So by choosing to not take the leap and move across the country, not take the leap and change careers, not take the leap and dive full into the thing that you're passionate about, you are still choosing. You're choosing to, keep things status quo. You're choosing to be okay with settling for just okay, as opposed to pushing yourself to see what might be possible if you just, again, took that chance, trusted yourself, and trusted the fact that there are people out there who support you and encourage you and want to see you succeed. I would say that most people would want to see you succeed than though more so than those who want to see you fail.
Laura, I could not agree more. And I think so much of it also is we're hearing all the voices inside our own head. I've realized from moving all over the country that it's not like your friends or people that care about you don't care. It's just they're also living their own lives. So it's one of those things where you make it to be, I say, think sometimes bigger in your head than it is actually to the outside world, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And, especially when we seek like outside counsel, right? Our friends, our family, like, should I do this? Should I take this chance? They're coming at it from a position of either their lived experiences, right? Like they're a product of their conditioning. So, however they were taught to believe or think about these situations, or like their negative experience with a move is now going to impact how they advise you on what you should do. So they're coming from it from that perspective, but they're also coming at it a lot of times from a place of wanting to protect you and keep you safe, right? The people who love you want to see you safe. And so they might see something like a move or a career change, or, a step down in order to take a step forward further on. They might see that as unsafe. And so I think that, again, in most situations, they're coming from a place of love and genuinely caring about you. But when we outsource our decisions, we essentially like we take the power away from ourselves, and we limit our own ability to, you know, decide what we want, decide how we're going to go after it, and then take those steps in that direction simply because we're letting outside counsel make the decisions for us.
Laura, I could not agree more. What were you working on after you were out in California?
Yeah, so again, through the course of a few different career changes and pivots, I worked in private households and decided that that wasn't quite what I wanted to do. I loved it. I loved the people I was supporting, and really the common theme in my career has always been supporting others. So again, hospitality, you're serving and supporting a large number of guests from all over the world. In household management, I was working in one dedicated home for one family and really taking care of their needs and supporting them. And I really enjoyed it, but I felt like there was something more. I've always had a passion and a love for teaching and coaching and advising. And I've had an opportunity to work for a school in Colorado, the one that actually trained me to do household management. So I started working there, and one of the roles that I was responsible for was teaching Myers-Briggs to our students. So we had students coming in, and so I got certified as a Myers-Briggs facilitator, and that was my first sort of toe dip into personal and professional development through assessments and that type of tool. And so that was really a turning point for me. That was kind of an opportunity to go, wow, like there are tools out there that can help us grow and expand and become a new version of ourselves if only we knew this information. So that was a big piece for me. And then about a year or so after I got that certification, I left the job that I was in, working for the household management training school. And that was definitely a I have no idea what's next kind of moment for me. So the fork in the road, if you will, of like not knowing where we're going next. I had told my boss that I wanted to leave, but I was like, probably in the next 6 months. I'm sort of starting to put some feelers out for what I want to do next. I don't have a timeline. And she at the time when I said that said, no, you're not allowed to quit. You said you would work for me for 2 years. You haven't been here for 2 years. You can't quit. So I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. And then about 3 months after that initial conversation, it was like late May, early June, and she said, I messed something up. Like I definitely made a huge mistake at work, and she was very upset about it. And said to me, it happened to be a Friday. She was like, you know what, Laura, today can be your last day. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So I finished up what I had to do, wrapped up my projects, and left that day. And I was thinking, like, okay, like I think I just got fired, but she didn't say you're fired, so it's kind of a weird situation. But yeah, I left, and I kind of felt this weight lift off of me. And I remember I was house sitting for a friend, and I went back to her place and was hanging out with her cat and her dog and drinking a glass of wine. And I was like, cool, like I don't know what's next, but I'm excited about it. And that boss happened to email me over the weekend, and she said, you left your desk a mess and there are all these unfinished projects. I will allow you to come back and work for me part time until we wrap that up. And I was like, interesting. And again, outsourcing your decisions, right? I was thinking, like, oh man, maybe I made a bad choice. Maybe I should go back. Like, salary's pretty cool. Like, it's nice to have a paycheck. And then on Sunday, I was sitting there thinking about it, and I was like, wow, the idea of going back and working in that environment, kind of a toxic situation, I was like, I can't do it. Like I got sick to my stomach just thinking about it. And I was like, I need to trust myself here that that is not the right move for me. So I politely declined the offer to go back and work part time. And really, I mean, like I said, it was a lot of unknowns. I signed up to be an Uber driver. So I was driving for Uber, and I was like, if this is what I have to do for the time being, like, that's what I'll do. Like, I am fully in control. I am in the driver's seat, no pun intended. But I have complete control over what I do at this point. And that sense of freedom was just, I mean, that was worth it 100%.
What did you know about personal and professional development before you started working on those type of systems?
Not a lot. So I'd done a coaching program a couple years before that one of my friends mentioned to me, and I didn't really get that it was personal development at the time. I mean, I don't think I'd put that label on it. So it was just a program that she was running. And that was kind of my first foray into it. But it was really more on the little bit of it was mindset, but it was, there was health and nutrition aspects, and there were a bunch of different things going on that I needed at that time because I was coming out of a marriage that, obviously ended because I was coming out of it. So I was coming out of a relationship, and so it was a great opportunity for me to like reconnect with myself, but I didn't really see it as the professional development. And so I think that was kind of my first exposure to it. But beyond that, like I wasn't the person who read, the self-help books or anything like that growing up, or like as a young adult. And I think that's actually a deficit that many people have, is like we don't know that there are resources out there that we have access to, so we don't ever choose to explore it. Because I certainly know that there was no like personal and professional development course offered in college to help me figure this kind of stuff out.
Laura, you mentioned that. I just think it's so important once people get the opportunity and exposure to learn more about themselves. It creates such an unlock that you can, as you mentioned, one of your goals or at least trajectories with your career has been to help others. It's kind of
Mhm.
like when you put that oxygen mask on first when you're on the flight. Once you start to get that, you can then help others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, hey, I am not perfect by any means. I am not fully actualized as a human, right? Like I have not reached nirvana by any state of the imagination. But it's a commitment, and it's an ongoing commitment, right? Just like going to the gym. If you want to have success in the gym, you go to the gym consistently. You make that commitment. If you want to, eat healthier, you have to make a commitment. Eating healthy one day a week doesn't really do a whole lot. So, but the commitment to figuring out, what I'm all about, what challenges me, the things that I like, the things that I don't like. And I think it's different for every phase of life as well. The person I was at 21, 22, totally different than the person I am now. So being aware that like, even as an individual, I'm allowed to change. I'm allowed to decide I want something different or better for my life. And we are fortunate to live in a country where, generally speaking, we have the ability to pursue those things. So, it's just one of those things that, like, being aware that there are other things available to you. You just have to be willing to look for them and pursue them, through questions, through your own exploration and discovery. But it's out there. It's just a matter of how you get to it.
Laura, I couldn't agree more. You mentioned making a decision, you can go east, you can go west. You make a decision, or in your case, maybe the decision was made for you, and then you confirm that decision by choosing not to go back. Can you tell me what happened after that?
Oh goodness. So that fork in the road led to another one a couple years later. I spent basically 2 years as a full-time Uber driver, which was hilarious in the sense that I called my Uber like a, therapy session on wheels. People would get in my car and we would talk about any number of things, but the number of times that I was giving advice, or I was suggesting, different ways to look at the situation. It's kind of interesting how much people open up to their Uber drivers. Maybe that's just how they open up to me. I don't know. But so in that time, I also committed a lot to doing, to networking. So I was going to a lot of networking events. I was being really intentional with how I spent my time outside of Uber driving, and made a lot of really interesting connections in the sports space. So I was working, I met a couple of agents and players along the way, professional players in Denver, and discovered that I really wanted to work with pro athletes and elite athletes, because I was passionate about that space of helping them figure out, like, they were great at their sports, but they were struggling in so many things, like relationships and just like life out of sport, and how do you navigate that. And that was when I discovered the world of athlete development, which is what I really like. I was like, I want to do this. Like, how do I get into this world? So that was another sort of turning point for me. I remember one night I was driving for Uber. I was super frustrated. Things just were not going according to plan, right? Like the amount of money that was coming in was not what I needed it to be that night. And I was like, this is not going to work much longer. And so I was like, maybe there's like a master's program out there that would help me get into this like sport athlete space. I had literally no idea what it was, or where to find it. So I went home that night, got on the internet, and just started Googling sport management programs. And I was like, I either want it to be, specific to athlete development, or I want it to be like leadership development. And I found a program that was a master's in sport management with a specialization in athlete development. And I was like, that's it. That's the one I'm going to apply for. And I did. And I got accepted. I remember when I was waiting for the decision letter, somebody asked me, they're like, well, what are you going to do if you don't get accepted? And I was like, I never even like considered that an option. Like, I'm so clear that this is what I want to do, that it has to happen. That's the only way it's going to go. And so I got into that program, and that was another turning point for me, was being able to access a network of individuals at a reputable institution, plus their alumni. So that was a huge piece for me. And then even a couple months later, after my first semester, I left Colorado and I moved to Florida to do the program in person. And that was another, again, huge turning point of then building the network, meeting more people, really getting immersed in the culture and the experience of it. And yeah, so that was sort of how the athlete development, the athlete side of my life came together.
Laura, that's such a great outlook. There's no real plan B. You assumed you were going to get in. And I tell people it's not coming from a place of, I guess, being conceited or anything like that. It's just you have that belief. And I don't know how to
Mhm.
describe it to others, but there's times when I'm working with a client that I would love to because we just make sense working together. I'm like, in my brain, this is happening. Maybe in my heart and my soul, I think it's going to happen. And
Yeah.
there really isn't that plan B. It's just I believe that it's going to happen. So therefore, it has to happen. Maybe not exactly how I anticipate it, but whatever happens is for the right reason.
Yeah, definitely. And in my work, we call that your vision. Like, what's your vision of the situation? And we tend to talk sort of broad vision or like the big vision, but I think you can have visions that are very specific to like one area. Like, again, in that situation for grad school, for me, it was no, like my vision is getting a master's degree that's very specific to this thing, and this is the school that provides it, so that's where I'm going to go. And I think when you're really clear on that, the things that are not going to get you there no longer are options, right? Like they fall away as even potential options because they're not going to get you where you want to go. So I think the vision is really important.
Laura, I couldn't agree more. What happens once you get down to Florida?
Oh goodness! So I came to Florida, and that was summer of 2019, like August of 2019, when I moved down here. We all know what happened in February of 2020. You don't have to go down that road. So things shifted a little bit, but I graduated with a master's in 2020, December of 2020, and really it was trying to find the inroads, trying to find the opportunities to do the coaching, to do professional development, personal development for athletes. And I remember in like January, February of 2021, again, one of those like, dang it, things aren't working for me. Like my pivot moments tend to happen in moments of frustration. I don't know if that's true for you, but definitely happened in like oh, I got to make something change here. And I like thought back to my bachelor's degree and I was like, oh, direct mail marketing campaign. I wonder what that would look like. And so I got a little creative. I sent cards to every single NFL team. That's really the space that I wanted to be working in. Sent cards to every NFL team saying like, "Hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm going to follow up with you in a couple weeks with an email." And I was like, "This is not going to work, right? Like, there's no way this is going to work." But it's fun, and it's costing me postage and some cards and envelopes. And so I did that. I followed up with the email a couple weeks later, and I actually got a response from the Baltimore Ravens. They were like, "Hey, this sounds really cool. Like, let's talk about this." And so they had me do a virtual workshop for their rookies that season. So it was really about transitions and transitioning in life, and just how they can manage and kind of pre plan for those transitions, which was not my area of focus, not the thing that I'm most passionate about, but it's something that I obviously know, having moved around the country quite a bit and done a lot of transitions myself. So that was a really great experience, like being brought in by an NFL team, simply because I took a chance and was like, look, if nobody responds to this, then I'm no worse off than I was before. I'm out like $50 for the postage and the cards, right? But it's possible that somebody will respond, and they did. So that was my first experience, and that was kind of when I was like, wow, this is like the coaching and the consulting space. That's really where I wanted to be. For quite a while, I thought I wanted to be embedded with a team, and while I still see a lot of value in that, and that's something that I would be open to exploring, I really love the freedom of working with a variety of clients, working with people from all different backgrounds and walks of life, people who are dealing with different challenges. And not to say that athletes are all dealing with the same challenges, but it's when you're talking to an athlete versus a musical artist versus a corporate CEO, right? Like they do have different challenges they're facing. So I really like the freedom and flexibility of working with a variety of clients. And that's why I've continued to pursue coaching in the space of, professional development coaching, executive coaching is now kind of where I'm at.
Laura, that's fascinating. I think so much of it is realizing what you like, what you're passionate, but also where there's a need. And so while you
Mhm.
maybe didn't anticipate what happened with the Ravens, it's one of those things where the universe, the world shows you what is needed from you at this exact moment. And it's just exciting to see how it continues to build and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said that, the universal moment of like, this is what's needed from you right now. And again, like we can change, right? Like the things that we want to do might change tomorrow. But, the universe definitely has a way of telling you, or God, or whoever, whatever your belief system is, of saying, like, this is what you're supposed to be doing right now. And here, you won't know it for 5 years that that's why, but like, this is why, this is what's going on. And so just trusting that, right? Like trusting yourself to know that you can figure it out. And then also trusting that there's a reason why this idea or desire or goal or passion was put in you, on your heart, in your heart, whatever it is. Like there's a reason it was given to you and not somebody else, because you're the person who's supposed to figure out how to make it happen.
Laura, you mentioned it that you don't see it in the moment, and so much as I can see with your life is it's been pivoting, and I call it a lot of times making the next best decision. You don't know the other
Mhm.
side, as we mentioned, but it's making in your mind at that moment with the information you have, making the next best decision you can.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like that's a great way to phrase it. The next best decision, right? Because it's not, we don't get a blueprint to life. We don't get the outline saying like, well, when you're 9, you're going to have somebody, you're going to get your heart broken for the first time, and then when you're 12, it's, like we don't get that. So we don't see that if I take this step now, this is what's going to open up for me 10 steps down. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people struggle with, is the feeling of, they want to do, they check the boxes, right? They're just checking the boxes, doing what they think they should be doing. And they're afraid to take steps that seem unsure because they don't know what the outcome is going to be. So yeah, they close themselves off from opportunities quite a bit.
Or you mentioned that. I think so much of it, as we mentioned before, is the fear of judgment, fear of whatever. But I always tell people if you pull it off, or when you pull, I should say, when you pull it off, those friends and people who support you from behind the scenes, whether they talk to you every day or haven't talked to you in years, it is a really good feeling for them to come up and say, "Hey, I knew you were going to do it," or "Hey, I didn't know if you were going to do it, but I'm so happy you did." It's just, I tell people it's such a rewarding feeling to know those people that in the background support you. It's great your family and your friends that you talk to every day because they're your family and your friends. You talk to them every day. I think
Right.
it's so much of those people that you don't get to see all the time that have been quietly supporting you from behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I think that's, like I tell people all the time, I'm your biggest cheerleader. I may not have ever met you in person, but I am the person, like my one of my core beliefs is that there is more than enough success to go around. There is more than enough good stuff in this world for all of us to have some of it. So I like being people's cheerleader. I want you to succeed. I may not have ever met you, but as long as what you're doing is like good, right? As long as you're up to good stuff, you're not trying to like take over the world or something. I want you to succeed, and I think there are a lot of people out there who don't know that there's somebody cheering for them. And again, even if I've never met you, I'm cheering for you from the sidelines. Like I'm back here. I'm like, I want you to do it. I love seeing success stories of the startups that finally make it. I love seeing the hearing the stories of the athletes who came from nothing and have accomplished amazing things, just as much as I love hearing the stories of the athletes who worked hard and put in the effort and had the natural talent or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, they're just, I again, like I said earlier, I think far more people want to see you succeed than those who want to see you fail, because we all love succeeding. Like we all know how good it feels to succeed, and like I said, I personally believe that just because I succeed doesn't mean you have to fail, and vice versa. So I don't think that in any situation, for the most part, that one person's success has to equal another person's total and complete failure. Let me put it that way.
Laura, I appreciate you said that. It's funny you mentioned that because I think that's the first thing you said to me in the first like 5 seconds of our pre-call conversation is talking about how you're the people's biggest cheerleaders. And I'm
Mhm.
just such a believer, and it's a big ocean. There's multiple oceans, I tell people too. So I think there's room for everyone to succeed. It doesn't mean, okay, maybe we're competing on this exact pitch or this exact client, but that doesn't mean I'm losing everything because you won one. You never know how that relationship continue to grow and evolve, and maybe my services isn't the best for them, so when I'm moving on from that client, I'm like, hey, you should really talk to Laura, she does great with this kind of things. And it just continue to always build that connection and not burn down bridges. I always like to build bridges.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a great point. Like the stronger your network, the better, right, for everyone. And there's nothing wrong with highlighting someone else's strengths in an area that you don't have those same strengths, because you're right, like it could be a personality fit, it could be a culture fit, it could be a financial fit for somebody to work with one of your supposed competitors. And I like what you said, there are multiple oceans. I think also, so that's a great way to phrase it, right? Like maybe you are meant to be successful in this space, just not in this space, right? Like what would happen if you took your skill set to another company, to another state, to another whatever it is? How could you find success in another environment doing similar work, but that would be more gratifying, more fulfilling, whatever it is you're looking for?
Or I could not agree more. And as you mentioned it, you might not feel that way at that exact moment. I tell people that's not going to feel great in the moment, but 2 years, 3 years down the line, you're like, oh, I see why that happened. That makes
Right.
sense. Thank you, universe, for whatever direction you just steered me at that moment. I wasn't thanking you at the moment, but I'm happy it ended up turning out that way.
Yeah, change is really hard and big change is very uncomfortable. And like our lovely little human lizard brain, like it's there to keep us safe, and change is not safe, right? Like that's what our brains are wired to believe. I watched the movie The Cruise not too long ago. I've seen it before, but a Disney animated movie, which I it kept coming up to me. I was like, why do I keep thinking of this movie? Like, I don't have kids. I don't. Why am I thinking about this? And so I finally rewatched it, and it's the dad's mentality is outside of the cave is bad, inside of the cave is good. We stay inside the cave. We never change. We never do anything different. And I guess the midway point of the movie is when the daughter says, um, "That wasn't living. That was just not dying. There's a difference." And I think that like that, I'm probably going to get that tattooed somewhere because I'm like, that's a huge distinction. You weren't living. You were simply not dying.
Laura, that's such an important point because I think so much of it is, and it is your body, yourself, your mind trying to keep yourself alive and safe. And I tell people the more you do it, yes, it's always a little bit going to feel like that peak of a roller coaster. I tell people, but when
Hmm.
you're going down, you're going to feel in the pit of your stomach. But now, at least for me, it's more exciting. When I feel that kind of push against a little bit of whatever it might be, I'm more excited to kind of lean into it more than I would have been the first time I made a big decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that reminds me of something that I heard from a mentor, a business coach years ago that nervousness and excitement feel the exact same in your body. It's just how you choose to relate to it. So when you're feeling nervous, when you have that like knot in the pit of your stomach, like you can choose to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. I'm so like this isn't gonna go well. I have anxiety around it. I'm scared. Or you can be like, ooh, something's gonna happen. Like something good is about to happen. I can't wait to see what it is. I can't wait to figure out why I'm feeling this way because it's probably gonna be something pretty cool.
Or I couldn't agree more. Sometimes I feel myself get more anxious when I'm in a place of security than I when I'm not because I'm like, all right, what's next? I'm excited to see what else is out there. But it's just I think one of those things. It comes with the experience, like repetition in sports and anything. The more you do anything, the better you get at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like change is hard. Change is not something that we naturally seek out. So getting into that, and it starts with your mindset, right? Is your mindset about growth and development and trying to figure out what's next for me? Or is your mindset more like everything's good for now, so I'll just be okay with how it is now? Because I think a lot of times when we are thrust into change, when change is thrust upon us, that's why we have so much anxiety about it. Because we're like, oh my gosh, the last time, like when I got fired from that job, I was so nervous. I'm like, yeah, but I figured it out. I'm a smart person. I know how to use the internet and my phone, and I know how to ask people for help or suggestions. I know how to do things right. So underestimating yourself, I think, is the thing that fuels the fear. When you underestimate yourself, your abilities, that's when you fuel the fear, and you stoke that fire, which is completely unnecessary. But we all do it at some point.
Or I couldn't agree more. So, title of the podcast: Into the Unknown. I want to know, what are you working on? What do you have going on right now?
That is a great question. So, I am a meta performance executive coach, which basically means that I help take people from where they are now to where they're capable of going. I don't know where that is. And that's kind of why I love this work, because every human is different. And the things that we are excited about and kind of feeling drawn to. It's different for everyone. And so meta performance coaching really focuses on what we've talked a little bit about in this call, which is that vision, right? Like, what is the vision for your life? What's the thing that lights you up, excites you, thrills you, gives you butterflies in your stomach in like the good, excited way? And how do we get you there? So the meta performance coaching is, I'm passionate about it because it looks at, again, taking you beyond high performance. We work with a lot of high performers. We also work with people who do not see themselves as high performers. But one of the things that was said recently was, if you're trying to get to the next level, whatever the next level is for you, like, that's what we're here for. Because my next level is going to be totally different than your next level, and that's okay. But I can still cheerlead for you. I can still help you identify your blind spots, work through some of those limiting beliefs and stories you're telling yourself, and craft a strategy that's going to get you closer to that vision. So that is really meta performance executive coaching in a nutshell, is helping you figure out your vision and then working on the strategy and the mindset pieces that are going to be required to get you there, to help you transform into the person who can actualize that vision.
Laura, if people want to learn more about that, where can they find you on social media? Where are you?
So right now, the best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. So I will make sure that you have that information. But LinkedIn is where I'm doing most of my work at the moment. I'm doing a lot. I'm doing twice a month vision workshops. So it's called Your Vision Creates Your Life. And those are free for anyone to attend. So it's about an hour. We do them one in the evening during the month, and then one kind of like a lunch and learn style midday. So those are a great way for people to learn more about this vision thing, get a chance to talk to me and ask me questions. It is interactive. And so that's a great way. And I post all of those on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me at this point.
Laura, I will make sure to absolutely link that in the show notes. And again, I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. It's been really informative, really interesting, and I can't wait to see where your journey takes you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy. This was awesome. And I really appreciate it.
We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.